Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
Welcome back to another episode of the Classic Gaming and Brothers.
Classic Gaming and Brothers podcast.
That's right.
The CGB, the CGNB.
The CGNB. You got no questions and we got answers.
Yes, that's right. You got no questions. We got no answers.
No, we have answers. We just have answers to none of your questions.
That's true. And we bring you topics that not only do you not know about, but sometimes don't care about.
Well, sometimes don't care about. That's being generous.
Well, sometimes people make requests for episodes,
That's right.
And we honor those requests. And I assume the people who make those requests care about it.
Yeah, but they don't care about our coverage of it.
Well, how do you know?
They never say thanks.
Well, maybe
Or
it's the thought that counts.
We have gotten things that say you did a bad job.
That was just the Atari Jaguar fans.
I know. They said do an episode about Atari Jaguar, and then we did an episode of Atari Jaguar, and then they said
You did it wrong. Do it again.
You have besmirched the name of the Atari Jaguar.
Well, we don't have anything from producer Doug. No complaints.
Yeah, you know what we should do?
What should we do?
People should write into us with questions, and we should try to answer them.
That'd be nice.
But they should all be non-video game related questions.
Oh, that's the best idea. People should ask us questions unrelated to video games, and we should answer them.
Yes, preferably legal or financial questions.
Yes.
So we can give you unsolicited legal and or financial advice.
Yes, 100%.
But be able to say we are not qualified to give you said advice, so you can't sue us.
We should answer any questions regarding anything but video games.
Yeah, so if you're having issues, maybe going through a divorce or have a lawsuit pending, ask us a question about it. We'll give you our unbiased opinion.
That's right.
If you have a question about video game, though, save that for another pod. Maybe
yes,
still loading.
That's not what Classic Gaming Brothers do. We don't answer questions about video games. We tell you about video games.
That's right.
Well, speaking of video games, Seth, what have you been recently playing?
Well, I have a video game alert that I beat a video game. I finished Call of the Sea on May 12th. I actually wrote a little bit about it. After I beat a video game, I usually write my opinions in a notebook. And by notebook, I mean a notes app. And so I wrote an entry on Call of the Sea. I said that it was a fun puzzler, a little bit of a slow story. It was a good reveal, like the twist, surprise. It was Lovecraftian in nature, but it was not scary Lovecraftian. It was just kind of like there. It was like edges of Lovecraftian. I assume the sequel, Call of the Elder Gods, is going to be more Lovecraftian. But and then it had very good puzzles. They were difficult, but not difficult enough. I only needed a little bit of a push on a couple, or else I'd still be playing it if I didn't get that push. Yeah, so it was good. There was a choice at the end, but it appears that the developer Out of the Blue Games just released Call of the Elder Gods, which is the sequel to Call of the Sea. And when I beat Call of the Sea, I went to Steam and I said, I wonder how that sequel's coming out. And I opened the Steam page and I saw a bunch of reviews for the game. And I was like, it's already out. And then I saw the release date and it was the day that I beat Call of the Sea. So
nice.
I said, I'll pick this up and start it. So then I picked it up and played through the prologue, and I got into the chapter 1. And so that's what I've been playing recently is the Call of the Elder Gods, which is the sequel to Call of the Sea. It is done by Out of the Blue Games, who also did American Arcadia, that was one of my favorite games. I think of last year was when I played it. I loved American Arcadia. I thought it was a great game. American Arcadia is the reason why I went back to beat Call of the Sea, and then now playing Call of the Elder Gods, you could feel the growth of the studio between Call of the Sea, American Arcadia, and Call of the Elder Gods. Like, the game has just, like, the quality of life improvements, the controls, the, like, intuitiveness of the game. They really learned a lot in all the games that they've made, so it's really cool to see the studio kind of really take off. And it's just really cool. So I've been playing Call of the Elder Gods by Out of the Blue Games, and it came out May of this year.
Nice.
Zach.
Yes, Seth.
What have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing Forbidden Solitaire, released at the end of April of 2026. The game is developed by two companies, Gray Alien Games and Night Signal Entertainment. Let me tell you something about these two companies. This game feels like the perfect merging of these two companies, and I'll explain why a bit later. Forbidden Solitaire, though, is a horror card game where you play as a person named Will Roberta, who recently bought a copy of a 1990s PC game called Forbidden Solitaire that he found at a thrift store. You launch the game on your computer, and it begins getting spooky and weird as you learn about the history of the game through instant messages that you get from your sister, who sends you links to videos about the controversy surrounding the game's development and its release. I don't want to give too much away. I will say it's a spooky game, not overly spooky. There's no like jump scares really in it. It is just kind of an eerie game where things just feel off while you're playing it, but it does a really good job at bringing up the nostalgia of playing a game from the 1990s that's just a little creepy. You know, when you think back at games from your childhood, sometimes you like remember playing any game and you're just like, that game was kind of creepy. Like, I sometimes think about the Windows Animation Festival CD, that CD that took us forever to remember what it was called. But I think about that sometimes and I'm like, it was a little creepy when you think about some of those animations. And then you watch them now and you're like, they're not that creepy. It's just like dated animation. But at the time, it was a little strange. Another example might be like, I don't know, Encarta. Like the clown can be a little spooky, or the jester can be a little spooky. And when you think back on it, you're like, it was a little creepy at the time. And then you're like, it's just kind of a jester. So that's kind of the vibe this gives, but there's more to it. The game has kind of this undertone of creepiness that is tied to the story. It does a good job at mixing really retro 90s CGI with FMV sequences that are really fun. And one thing I really like is the solitaire system. So the game uses a system where it kind of plays like a dungeon crawler, but whenever you encounter something like a locked door or a enemy, it brings you into a solitaire system where you have to chain combos. And during, like, for example, an enemy encounter, as you chain combos, that increases the damage that you're going to do on an enemy. You can also pull out jokers, and jokers will allow you to do different bonuses, such as wiping out certain cards of a certain suit or working as a wild card. So putting the joker on top allows you to start stacking a new row. But I really like Forbidden Solitaire. I really like the aesthetic. I really like the gameplay. And what I mean by the fact that I think this is a perfect blend of Gray Alien Games and Night Signal Entertainment is that if you look up their previous games, Night Signal Entertainment specifically has made a lot of atmospheric horror games, or at least a handful of them. Gray Alien Games makes a lot of solitaire games, not scary solitaire games, just like Regency Solitaire or Shadowhand Solitaire, which is about pirates. One of their other games I definitely want to try out is called Home Safety Hotline, where you are playing as a operator who is designed to take calls from people who are experiencing hauntings and other things. It says, hearing noises, seeing things, called Home Safety Hotline. Our operators are standing by, waiting to give you the answers you need to protect your home from all manners of pests and hazards. And I assume it's about ghosts. Though the game I've been playing from them is Forbidden Solitaire. I definitely recommend checking it out if you like puzzle games, if you like horror games, or if you just like 90s style games that kind of harken back to that era. Definitely recommend it. And yeah, it's available on Steam.
Nice.
Yeah, well, speaking of games that are available on Steam and games that harken back to a different era, today we're talking about a game that we've alluded to a few times in the past few episodes. This is Fields of Glory, which is a war simulator game, which it could be a whole topic in itself, but we're going to talk about Fields of Glory alone before before we go into war simulators. I'll start off by talking about my memories of Fields of Glory. I don't have a ton of them because I don't think I ever personally played the game. I do remember that we owned it. I remember seeing the CD, the jewel case of it, maybe sitting around the house. I just remember the cover art with like the people in the Napoleonic outfits fighting each other. And I do think I might have watched our father play it. I don't know if I ever watched you play it, Seth, but I think I remember watching Dad play it maybe once or twice, watching all the different little men move across the screen. To be honest, I don't really remember anything else about the game. I was actually watching some gameplay footage of it recently, and like the opening cinematics where it just shows like paper doll people fighting each other, I was like, I don't remember this at all, and this is so like distinctive, but the rest of the game is very familiar to me. Is just like just the aesthetic of it. But what about you, Seth? What memories do you have of Fields of Glory?
Fields of Glory hit me at an interesting time. At the time I was a young lad, and I was really into Napoleon, and Fields of Glory covers Napoleon.
You do go I do notice that you go through phases where you got really into the Titanic and then you got really into Napoleon.
Yeah, I think I still have emotions tied to both the Titanic and Napoleon. But like when I was a kid, I was really into Napoleon. I had a little book about the little man, and which he was decidedly average size. You had a book about the little man. It was a little book about the little man.
Oh, a little book about the little man.
Yeah, a little book about the little man, and how like very good at his job that he was, and that he was so good that he became the emperor. And then at one point in time, he was exiled, came back, became the emperor again. And then finally they banished him again, this time to a place where he couldn't get out. They were like, the last time that he could get out, he just came back and recruited everybody to go against our enemies. Which is one thing because he's Corsican and he ran the French Empire, so it was always kind of funny because he was a Corsican that became the Emperor of France. And even the French wouldn't kill their emperor after he was exiled.
Yeah.
Anyway, Fields of Glory takes place around the Napoleonic Wars, and you can actually have a little Napoleon as your commander, as your units, and you can go against Wellington during Waterloo. Another fun fact, Napoleon lost Waterloo because he wasn't there. He was experiencing hemorrhoids in his bed and was not present during Waterloo, so decidedly why he lost. One of some core memories of Fields of Glory is you had to type in fog to get the game going. So in the MS-DOS, you had to get the executable to launch, you had to do like cd/fog, and that's what brought the game in. So like I always think of Fields of Glory when I think of fog, and which I don't think about a lot, but I do think about more often when, you know, like there's fog around, or, you know, the fog of war, which I also thought that for a while that's where Fields of Glory came from, for the fog of war, because like the fog of it. And then I remember playing certain maps where I thought I was smart by being tactical, by either forming like getting everybody into a farmhouse and then using the farmhouse as cover. And I remember when the troops went into the farmhouse, all the little guns would come out of the little window. And then also one of my more favorite moves to do was when cavalry were coming to form a square to fight off the cavalry. My dad said that's the best maneuver to fight cavalry off, is forming a square. There was one other thing that I remember just now talking about it was I remember I played Waterloo once, and whenever you took out whoever the commander was of the map, it just went down to the next commander. And I was playing the French side of the Waterloo fight, and you could see like Wellington and the leaders of the British side over back at the back of the land. And I was like, oh, I have an idea. I'm just going to kill those guys. So I sent cavalry units and like stretched the line to go out and around all the way to then come up behind Wellington and strike Wellington down and kill the commanding officers of the Waterloo battle. I still lost because while I was doing that, I was not really manning the front, as it were. So like I lost positioning, and ultimately some other commander won the day. But yeah, I did kill Wellington on that day.
Nice.
Whenever going to like conventions and seeing war games set up, they always kind of remind me of Fields of Glory. I guess Fields of Glory kind of reminds people of war games, but like we didn't grow up in England where like wargaming was really popular. So like for me, wargaming, and by wargaming I mean historical wargaming, where people collect miniatures of a certain era and then either make up their own rules or have a set rule to play against each other and fight historical battles. Whenever I see those setups, I'm always interested, but because we didn't grow up with it, I'm more nostalgic for like games like Fields of Glory, which felt like playing a historical war simulator. Yeah.
To get into the history of Fields of Glory, one thing I will say is finding information on the history of Fields of Glory as a game, a bit sparse. I did look different places. I pulled some stuff from different magazines. It doesn't help also that there is in fact another video game / war game out there called Field of Glory, which is entirely separate and unrelated to Fields of Glory, besides the fact that they are both war games. But to start everyone off, we'll talk, of course, about the company that made Fields of Glory, which is a company Seth and I love, and that is Microprose. We've talked about Microprose before. We talked about them way back when we probably started this podcast, when we talked about games like Return of the Phantom and Dragonsphere. But for those who might not have listened to those episodes, or the fact that we probably didn't do our due diligence, Microprose was founded in 1982 after Bill Steely, a retired USAF Reserve and Pennsylvania National Guard pilot, met computer programmer Sid Meier in the City of Dreams, Las Vegas. The two played a game together, Red Baron, and Meier consistently beat Steely over and over again when they played the game together, and Steely was surprised by this. Steely assumed he would win because he was the actual pilot, and Meier was not a pilot. Meier was a game programmer, but Meier told Steely that he was able to better understand the game because he had actually looked at its code at one point and could kind of predict how the game worked and was able to make his decisions based on the predictions that he had based on his understanding of the code. He also told Steely that he could definitely design a better game and could probably do it within a week. And Steely said, sure, if you build it, I will sell it. And while it didn't take him a week, it would actually take a little longer than a week, about 2 months, Meier would produce a game called Hellcat Ace, and Steely would go on to sell Hellcat Ace. In fact, in his first sales appointment, he sold around 50 copies of the game, and with that, they had a company. They had a product, and they were selling that product. So they had to come up with a name for the company, as they needed to, of course, protect their IP. So they chose the name Smuggler Software, but decided that was not a good name, so they went with Microprose. Though Microprose would end up being a pretty good name, I guess, and by 1986, they were making upward to $10 million in sales.
I never really thought about the name Microprose, but I mean, they've made some bangers. They're still making bangers. Microprose would make some of this early money through games like Floyd of the Jungle, Hellcat Ace, Spitfire Ace, Solo Flight, and Chopper Rescue. A majority of their early titles would be primarily on the Atari 8-bit line of computers, but soon would begin porting over to the Commodore 64, Apple II, and IBM PC. They also wouldn't just develop games, but would also publish games by other developers, such as Kennedy Approach, which was developed by game designer Andy Hollis. During the tail end of the 1980s, Microprose would begin releasing titles in the UK and also importing European titles for the US market. So they were developing games, publishing games, and also publishing import games as well, and bringing them to essentially localizing European titles in the US market. The 1990s were interesting for Microprose with the titles like Sid Meier's Railroad Tycoon, and of course, a little title called Sid Meier's Civilization, being probably the biggest releases that they had that year. Both really big games that have spawned their own things. Railroad Tycoon has spawned its own thing, and Civilization has spawned its own thing. They spawned genres. The company attempted to diversify into the arcade industry, but ultimately only released a few titles with the arcade division performing poorly. They also tried to get into adventure game genre, which they developed 3 games, all of them amazing: Rex Nebular and the Cosmic Genderbender, Return of the Phantom, and Dragonsphere. But that engine would end up getting sold to Sanctuary Woods. Did Sanctuary Woods make anything after that? I feel like they did.
They made they made that game Wolf. Do you want to know what Sanctuary Woods published?
Sure.
Journeyman Project Turbo.
Oh,
they were one of the publishers for it. They published it on the Mac OS, I think.
That's why I was thinking about them. In 1993, Microprose would develop Fields of Glory, which would be designed by Jim Bombra Bombro was no stranger to games and was already an established name in the RPG genre. He worked with TSR and helped design game books for Basic Set 3rd, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Expert Set, and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. Some of the game books that he worked on at TSR would include All That Glitters, ... Blade of Vengeance, Night's Dark Terror, The Creature Catalog, and The Complete Book of Dwarves, which I recall always wanting to buy. And maybe one day I'll have the complete book of... If you find me the complete book of dwarves...
I'll look for the complete book of dwarves.
Just go up to people when you're shopping around and say, do you
have
the complete book of dwarves? I need a book. It needs to be completely about dwarves, but it needs to be complete.
The complete.
He was also involved in Warhammer, working on the campaigns The Enemy Within, Shadows over Bogenhofen. He was also one of the designers of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. By and all large, his credentials said he was a nerd.
Yes, well, he was a nerd. He knew games, and also to Seth's point by mentioning that seeing war games often reminded him of Fields of Glory. Bamborough worked on war games, worked on Warhammer, which is a war game. So very much that was likely an inspiration going into working on Fields of Glory. And now Fields of Glory in many ways shows a bit of his experience with these different war games, as it primarily is a war simulation game, akin to what games like Warhammer and other titles are based on. And even arguably early D&D. I mean, the earliest versions of D&D were inspired by war games. While the game is described as a quote-unquote real-time strategy, according to modern descriptions, including its listing on Steam, I don't consider it a real-time strategy by the traditional sense of what real-time strategy tends to mean, which is a combination of base building and building an army. This, yes, is a real-time strategy game, but I would call it more accurately what it says on its box, the Battlefield Action and Leadership game, because that is a much better genre title. Your goal is to play through 4 major historical battles that occurred during the Waterloo campaign from Napoleon, the Battle of Quatre Bras, the Battle of Wavre, the Battle of Ligny, and of course the Battle of Waterloo. There are also 2 additional battles, though these are hypothetical battles, the Battle of Wagny and the Battle of Nivelles. Battles are done in real time, where you control a large collection of soldiers, potentially thousands, and this can be done in a close-up view or a tactical view, where the soldiers are much smaller on the screen. Not as vague of a tactical view as some war games are, where they're represented by triangles and squares. These will actually show you the figures of them, which is nice. I do like the groupings of soldiers that you see, versus there was some war game I was playing where all the armies were just represented by rectangles, and I was like, that is very not as exciting.
You had me play a game where everything was represented by rectangles. I don't even remember what the game was. It was where I was the ugliest man. I just remember I was the
ugliest man.
Ambush at the Soranar. It was a war game, but everything was squares, and I was playing as the ugliest man.
Oh yeah, Ambush at the Soranar.
Not that there was any choices of non-ugly people, as they were all ugly.
I was more thinking of games by Mindscape, where the enemy is represented by just the Nazi flag or something, and that's how you know that they're the Nazis.
like a war game, but more on the the strategic map of a commander moving.
Yes,
troops,
where the troops are represented by
flags or columns or something.
Yes,
take things over. This was more zoomed in than that. And
yes, you could actually see your units,
horses and men.
Yes,
because it was also less of it was a battlefield simulator versus a war simulator, which I think there's a distinction, because you can play a war simulator and never see a unit, because you're dealing with armies and movements of armies, and you're concentrating on winning the war, not necessarily the battle. Fields of Glory was a battlefield simulator, so you would go in and you would play in each of the individual battles, which is a vastly different experience than a war simulator.
In Fields of Glory, you have 3 main unit types. There's infantry, artillery, and cavalry. Artillery and cavalry can be subdivided into light and heavy, and when you control the game, you use the mouse to move your units into position, where you can either give them direct orders or plan out a larger command system through a chain of orders. This means that you're allowed to strategize while action is going on. So it is by definition a real-time strategy game. I just do have more of like, I think of more of like real-time strategy as like Command and Conquer, Warcraft, and Age of Empires versus like this, which just feels on a kind of a different level. Orders are given in terms of formation and movement, so you can move your units in a square, mixed, skirmish, column, or line, and instruct them to assault, deploy, hold, or withdraw. For artillery, you can use them to bombard a particular target or bombard a particular area, so if you don't necessarily need to, blast at just one army, you can kind of just, shell an area to provide cover. Orders appear as context items, so when you point and click your mouse, a menu will pop up that will allow you to choose the order you wish to give. One note on the game's development that I did want to make a highlight of, doing research of this game, I went to a couple different places, and one of those places was, yes, Wikipedia. And on Wikipedia, it said, Fields of Glory is based on a series of tabletop games of the same name. And I think that is a false statement, and I am going to tell you why. Because I searched for a good amount of time. I don't want to say like too long because I have other things to do with my life, but I searched for a good amount of time for any board games that were called Fields of Glory that were released in the 1980s or earlier, and I could not find any games by that name. I may be wrong. I might not have looked in the right place, but I think what is more accurate to say is that Fields of Glory was not based on tabletop games of the same name. It was based on different war simulation games of the same era that weren't necessarily the same name. I'm thinking literally anything by Avalon Hill produced from the 1970s into the 1990s, as a lot of them felt like Fields of Glory when you look at them. However, I don't think they were called Fields of Glory because I can't find any Avalon Hill games called Fields of Glory. However, I think also where the confusion lies is there is Field of Glory, which is based on a tabletop game and a tabletop series of the same name, and is also a video game. To the Wikipedia editor out there who worked on the Fields of Glory Wikipedia page, I want to tell you that you were wrong, and I was trying to figure out how to do source-cited ? Here, and I just couldn't figure it out, and because I'm bad at editing Wikipedia apparently, but
You're on notice.
You're on notice, Mr. Editor. I think you're wrong. I did look into it.
I like that the singular of the fields. So there's, the game that we've been talking about, Fields of Glory, which is, decidedly a game of the 90s, and Field of Glory, which came out in 2009.
Yeah.
I just like that were they going down and they're just like, nah, it's just gonna be one singular Field of Glory. Is there just one field that they play on? Is there no multiple fields?
I don't know.
Or could they just not be plural because of this game?
Part of me wonders if maybe they went to go file like a copyright and then we're like, oh wait,
Ooh,
darn,
we don't want
someone's
to
already
get
got it.
confused with another war simulating game.
Yeah. In terms of the rest of the development of the game, the music in the game, which is pretty good, was composed by John Broomhall, and we'll play some music at the top of the episode and maybe a little bit more here. But for those who aren't familiar with John Broomhall, you probably are, especially if you've played games like Sid Meier's Civilization, as he was the composer for that. He also did the music for UFO, Enemy Unknown, and XCOM Terror from the Deep, as well as like all the other XCOM games that were produced by Microprose. So John Broomhall is a kind of a central figure at Microprose in terms of music development and composition.
Yeah, and for all those other XCOM games that were made by Microprose, don't worry. You don't play them. Just play the first two.
But they do have very good music.
They do. Yeah. John Broomhall, like I really like his music. I did do some research while we were sitting here about the Microprose Adventure Development Studio, and there was two games that Sanctuary Woods made, and that was the game Orion Burger and Once Upon a Forest. Orion Burger looks good. Once Upon a Forest sounds like it's Orion Burger looks really good.
I do want to say Orion Burger sounds like if someone was trying to do a parody of like, what's that Orion game that you like? Masters of Orion?
Oh, Masters of Orion, yeah. I thought you were going to say the Orion Conspiracy, which that game is full of racism. So when Fields of Glory was released in 1993, it would be brought to MS-DOS, Amiga, and CD32. For PC, it would retail for $59.95. Holy crap. Dad bought that game from Buck-a-Book for like $1. I know it. He bought all Microprose, like just ended up in Buck-a-Book, and he bought only like Microprose games from Buck-a-Book, including Fields of Glory, Phantom of the Opera, and XCOM and the Dragon's Veer. All those games came from Buck Book.
Adjusted for inflation, $59.95 in 1993 is $140.
Yeah, he didn't spend that much money. He bought it for $20 and thought that was a lot.
Imagine buying a game for $140.
No, can you imagine buying Fields of Glory for
$140?
I'd be concerned about paying $5 for it. It required 2 megabytes of RAM, 15 megabytes of hard disk space, and supported AbLib, Sound Blaster, and Roland sound cards. Fields of Glory was decently received when it was released. Australian video game magazine Hyper gave it a 78%. In their review, they called Microprose the masters of grand intro and so-so gameplay, which is true. Their gameplay is better than so-so, but they are the masters of some grand intros. Like the intro to XCOM UFO Enemy Unknown, that intro slaps like really hard. The aliens screaming at them, they're running and grabbing their guns, and there's like alerts. And same with like Fields of Glory. They have like historical battle. Like it's just they're really good at making good intros. Hyper did also praise the professional graphics, noting that if you can watch each man die, which was something that was unique for that time. They criticized the sound and called the gameplay tough, but they also referred to it as a truly enjoyable tactical warfare. War's tough, especially battles. If you're playing in the French that they've lost, guess what? That battle's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Because they lost. Just play as the British, because I think the Prussians bailed them out of Waterloo. So then all of a sudden, 400 million Prussians just showed up and stomped everybody. In a review found in Computer Gaming World, issue 120, they praised the fact that the game covers a period of history that wasn't well yet covered as of yet in games. They did, however, criticize the game's AI and awkward interface. In one part of the review, they noted that moving against buildings can be a confusing task. It's difficult to determine when troops can actually move into advantageous territory, as opposed to merely stumbling around in front of the stone structures. They ultimately gave the game a 3 out of 5 and said the game would tickle the Napoleonic fancy of those with an interest in the period, like me. Though the reviewer also noted that he did not recommend it to general wargamers, which is great. So essentially, this game was just designed for me to enjoy.
This game is a very specific niche, and that niche is Seth Pierce.
Yes. The game can be still played today, as it's available on Steam and Good Old Games.
And do you think it's worth playing today?
If you get the game running to a point, there are some issues with the game where because it's running in DOS boxes and the animations may not be sped up appropriately in Steam and stuff like that. So if the game runs incorrectly, it's not going to be worth playing. But I think that, like, if you're interested in older strategy games and really want to take a step back in time and play a game that has some deep strategy and the core mechanics of the game, I think still hold up. I think ultimately, is it worth dropping $7 on? I don't know. You have to know if you like Napoleonic war games. Like, if you like older Napoleonic war games, then yeah, it might be worth picking up. But if you want just the next like Call of Duty, then no, probably not.
Oh, probably not. Well, that will do it for our Fields of Glory episode. So for all those out there who were begging for it, which was our dad, this one was for you. Classic
That's
dad.
Right, that's right, Dad. Maybe Zach will buy it for you for Father's Day.
Maybe. Now, to get into our retro rewinds, Seth had me play King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, developed by Manley and Associates, who I think we talked about recently because I remember Seth making fun of their name, and published by Enix. King Arthur and the Knights of Justice is a game based on the cartoon of the same name that I'd never heard of. This is a cartoon that ran in the 1990s, apparently for 2 seasons. The plot of the show and the game involves King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table being captured by the evil sorceress Morgana. Merlin then summons people from the future to save the day. He summons them because the name of the person he summons is named Arthur Knight, and his football team is called the Knights. So he summons a football team and dresses them up as knights, and they have to save the day. You take on the role of Arthur Knight, and you have to team up with 2 of your Knights of the Round Table, your Knights of Justice, as it were. I picked a guy whose name was... I don't actually remember the name. They had weird names. His name is Lug, and the other guy I picked was named Phil.
Lug and Phil?
Yes, Phil. And Phil disappeared from my screen. They follow you around because it's like 2 AI characters that follow you. One of them just disappeared at one point. I think he got stuck somewhere. And and the other one followed me, and when we got attacked by enemies, he ran away. I don't think the game holds up. I think the game was trying really hard to feel like a Zelda game, but it just does not achieve this at all. The AI is just all over the place, I just did not find it to be an enjoyable game. The show, however, sounds hilarious, and I might try to seek out episodes of the show. I assume they're full episodes for free on YouTube. If not, I'm sure it's available on like Tubi or something, but it sounds like a show that I would have watched if it was on TV at the time. But yeah, King Arthur, The Knights of Justice, not a game that holds up for me. Seth, I want you to stick with the Arthurian elements. I had Arthur on the brain because of this game, so I want you to play Conquests of Camelot for MS-DOS next week.
Cool. Sounds great. Zach had me play Instruments of Chaos, starring the young Indiana Jones, and it was developed by Brian A. Rice Incorporated and published by Sega, and was released on the Sega Genesis back in 1994. You play as a young Indiana Jones, and you have to fight the Germans because it's Indiana Jones, and that's generally who he fights, are Germans. Whether they're Nazis or not, to be determined, but they're definitely German. And you have to, essentially the Germans are trying to acquire technology to help with their war effort, and you have to travel between India, Egypt, Tibet, and London, and then eventually Germany to prevent their spies from getting the technology. The gameplay is interesting. The first level really reminded me of Disney's Aladdin, except if the controls were really, really loose and your whip did nothing that you wanted it to do, and that being the primary attack is not something that you would want not to be able to do anything. It's just like the whip just wildly just flies around Indiana Jones. It's kind of annoying. You have a gun, but it has limited ammunition, so you have to use the whip. And then there'll be little snakes that come after you, and you can't hit them because the whip is wildly swinging everywhere. It is annoying. The hitboxes are not right, like they are off, and I think that really holds it up a little bit because it really just feels like a knockoff of a better game. I don't think that it holds up. I think there are better action games out there. And next week, Zach, you can play Arrow the Acrobat for Sega Genesis.
Great, Will. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. If you have any thoughts or memories on Fields of Glory, be sure to email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on Facebook, on Blue Sky. Check us out. Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. We're also available on Twitch and, of course, on YouTube. Like and subscribe. And, of course, on Patreon. Be sure to support us if you feel so inclined. That being said, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.